Chapter 2. A Secret Study. It was almost as if time itself had stopped. Kai was frozen to the spot, his chest constricted, his lungs unable to take in air. His mind was stuck on repeat, replaying the words over and over in his head.
You needn't worry about Arden. He will not live past tonight.
A wave of panic hit Kai like a punch, but his feet still refused to move. They were going to kill him? They were going to kill Lord Arden? Kai shut his eyes and took a deep breath. As 1,000 thoughts raced through his head, one stood out amongst the noise. What do I do? What could he do? If he warned Arden about what his master had said, Umbri would kill him. If he tried to persuade his master against attacking Arden, he would kill him. If Umbri got even a suspicion that Kai had overheard the conversation, he would kill him. 3 different scenarios, all ending the same way. After all, if they were plotting to kill a maester of the Magi High Council, a mere slave's life would be of no consequence. What options did that leave? Finish cleaning up? Go to bed? Try to pretend a cold-blooded murder wasn't occurring on the floor above him? Kai could hear footsteps approaching the parlor door as he quickly and quietly bolted down the hall and rushed into the dining room. He crouched down and slid underneath the dining table to hide from view. Umbri, Tora, and Balthier filed out of the study and proceeded to the back door. As they walked away, Kai could hear Umbri say,
We shall place talismans around the grounds to dampen his magical ability and prevent him from teleporting. Then he will be no match for us.
Those were the last words Umbri whispered as all 3 of them headed out the back door onto the manor grounds. Kai remained crouched underneath the table for a long while, trying to figure out what his course of action should be. He was human, and this was a fight between mages. It should be no concern of Kai's, and involving himself in the matter could definitely spell his end. But if Umbri was successful, if Arden was killed, would Kai be able to live with himself, knowing he did nothing to try and stop it? Ignoring Umbri's actions made him complicit, and Kai knew that his survival at the expense of a good man wasn't an even trade, and one that would no doubt haunt him. No matter the risk, he had to get Arden out of the manor before Umbri got to him, and he had an idea for doing just that. Kai snuck out from under the dining table and pressed his face against the corner of the window in the dining room. The view out onto the grounds was pitch black, and there was no way to know for sure where Umbri and the others were in the darkness. He had no idea how long it would take for Umbri to place the talismans. He would have to be quick, or risk both Arden and himself being caught. It was now or never. Kai snuck up to the guest room on the 2nd floor, quiet as a mouse. He kept his eyes peeled on every window that he crossed to keep a line of sight on Umbri and his cohorts returning to the manor. Standing outside the guest room door, Kai began to knock, loud enough in hopes of gaining Arden's attention, but quietly enough so as not to draw Umbri's. To his relief, Arden opened the door and stood before Kai with an expression of bewilderment that was clear even in the dim light. Kai, are you aware of the hour? Kai nodded. Yes, and I'm sorry, my lord, but I had to. He stopped short when a noise down the hall caused him to snap his attention away. He was still as a statue for a moment, making sure the sound was not a person coming up the stairs. Arden could see Kai was noticeably on edge, and stepped aside to open his door in response. Come in, kid, he said, to which Kai instantly darted inside, free from the observance of any evil in the shadows. Kai brushed past Arden as he closed the door behind him. He immediately glued his face to the window. Since Kai was human, his eyesight in the dark was not great, but he wanted to see if he could at least detect Umbri and his guests' figures in the blackness from the 2nd-story vantage point. Unfortunately, the only thing he could see was shadows and a pathetic sliver of a moon. What he wouldn't give for a full moon tonight. Kai, what's wrong?
I had to warn you,
Kai whispered in response as he gave the grounds one last look. Warn me? Warn me about what?
They're going to kill you,
Kai stated, turning back to Arden.
Who? Umbri and the others. I heard them discussing it in the parlor.
Arden sighed and walked over to sit on a leather chair in the corner of the room. Your concern is touching, but no one is going to kill me. Now, I doubt they will be crying over my grave when my time does come, but trust me, that feeling is mutual.
This wasn't idle talk. I know what I heard.
Kid, I'm here on official business from the council. So what's Umbri's plan? Bury me in the garden and hope the council doesn't ask questions?
I don't know. Maybe he hasn't thought that far ahead?
Even in the darkness, Kai could see the skepticism on Arden's face, and it fueled his frustration. He didn't have time to try and convince him. Umbri would be back any minute.
Or maybe he's getting help from Oren?
Arden's head snapped to attention. Who did you say?
Oren. I heard Umbri mention him in the parlor. He said he was coming tonight and that they were giving him a stone.
You heard Umbri say that Oren was coming here tonight? Arden asked as he rose once again. You heard him mention giving Oren a stone? Kai nodded in response.
Umbri said that he would arrive once he gave the signal? After he finished you off.
Arden was silent for a long while, staring at the floor deep in thought. He finally chuckled. Well, hell. I didn't know Umbri was that desperate. Or stupid.
His stupidity, at least, I can attest to.
Outside the window, Kai noticed a sudden flash of red, as though someone had set off a firework. The red light shot toward the heavens and burst. Sprinkles of crimson rained down and hit the manor and grounds, causing the room to illuminate in an ominous blood-red glow. The red light lasted for only a moment before dissipating. Arden stared at it knowingly. A barrier.
Umbri said he was going to place amulets on the ground to dampen your abilities and keep you from teleporting.
Cowardly bastard. Afraid to face me at full power, huh? He should be.
I can get you out of the manor, but we have to move fast before Umbri and the others return.
Arden turned to Kai and smiled slightly. I appreciate the offer, but I can't leave yet. Kai was flabbergasted.
What? Why?
The stone. The one that Umbri mentioned. It's my whole reason for coming here.
Is a trinket really worth your life?
This trinket is. Especially if Umbri really is planning on handing it over to Oren. In his hands, people could die. I can't leave without it. Arden walked over to his cloak hanging on the wall next to the wardrobe and pulled a golden amulet from his pocket. He whispered to it, and the amulet glowed for a moment, then dimmed as Arden put the chain around his neck. Listen, kid, Arden stated as he turned back to Kai. Things are gonna get messy. I want you to go somewhere far from the manor and hide. And no matter what you hear, don't come out. You got it? But Kai didn't answer. If Arden was willing to put his life on the line for that stone, it had to be important. Kai wasn't going to just hide, not after he had already made the decision to help. He knew Umbri to be a cold-blooded bastard, and if the stone could hurt people, Kai didn't want Umbri anywhere near it either. Besides, helping Arden had already guaranteed Kai a short life of misery if he were caught. In for a penny, in for a pound. Kai, did you hear what I—
What does it look like?
What?
The stone. What does it look like?
Arden hesitated for a moment before replying. About the size of a fist, citrine yellow, glows slightly. Kai's eyes drifted to the floor as he quickly ran through every gem he could think of in the manor. There was the jewel in the suit of armor by the landing, but no, that was red. Or the display case in the living room? The jewel in the crown on the top of the shelf. That was yellow, but no, it didn't glow and wasn't the size of a fist. There was also a gem in the scepter adorning the wall in the conservatory, but no, that was an emerald. Have you seen it? Kai shook his head in response.
No.
Just then, Kai was struck with a sudden thought.
But I think I know where he would keep it.
Kai didn't give Arden time to inquire, as he rushed to the bedroom door and peered out into the hall. No Umbri, Tora, or Belfier.
Come on!
Kai motioned to Arden.
We will have to be quick if we're going to retrieve it before they return.
Arden seemed as though he would argue, but the look on Kai's face must have told him it would be futile. Arden grabbed his cloak and followed Kai out onto the hall landing. Kai's eyes darted around nervously as he led the way, looking for any sight or sound that Umbri had returned. The lighting in the manor was dim, only the soft moonlight through the windows and the sporadic lamps still lit from the day illuminated the space. But that didn't matter to Kai. He had walked the halls so many times he could do it blindfolded. Kai followed the hall up the stairs until he reached the library on the 3rd floor. He pushed open the double doors and proceeded past the high-backed chairs in the middle of the grand 2-story room. He immediately headed over to the painting of the dragon hanging over the fireplace mantel in the center of the room. Kai grabbed the candelabra off the coffee table and searched for something to light it. "What are you looking for?" Arden inquired.
"A light,"
Kai whispered back. As he searched for matches on the mantel used to light the fireplace, the wicks of the candles instantly ignited as Arden held his hand out. Kai had forgotten he had a mage in tow. He gave a nod of thanks to Arden. He held the flames up to the dragon's fire in the painting and watched as the flames in the picture began to glow and dance just like the flames on the candle. There was a click, and a door formed around the fireplace and then slid back to reveal a room behind it. Kai and Arden stood at the entrance of Umbri's study as a lamp within instantly ignited, illuminating the hidden room. This was the first time Kai had actually seen inside it. It looked like a fairly large but rather ordinary study. There was an ornate writing desk in front of a huge window in the center of the room. The walls were lined with books that appeared to be on a variety of magical subjects. There were some sort of beast remnants and jars on the shelves above the bookcase, a morbid collection of magical creatures. As Kai entered, he could see there didn't seem to be gold hidden anywhere, save for an ostentatious letter opener on the writing desk. It alone was coated in gold, with rubies inlaid in the hilt. "You think the stone will be here?" "If it would be anywhere, it would be here. Umbri never let me enter this room. It's where he stores everything he wishes to keep hidden." Arden accepted Kai's explanation and started scanning the drawers of the bookshelves for the item he was looking for. Kai dove in to help, searching bookcases and boxes as quickly as he could. He ran his hand along the volumes, looking for anything that could be out of place or tampered with. By the dust coating their spines, the books on the shelf hadn't been touched lately. Kai turned to inspect the room in its entirety once more. Arden was busy searching the desk, looking through the drawers, under papers, and inside the cigar box on Umbri's table. But as he scanned the room, the one thing that caught Kai's eye was a small clock on the shelf near the window, amongst the dusty volumes. What was strange is that the clock displayed midnight, when Kai knew the hour had come and passed long ago. Not only that, but the clock was not coated in a layer of dust, unlike many of the other trinkets within the study. It seemed to be the only thing on the shelf that did not show signs of neglect. Kai approached it for a closer look. The face of the clock was onyx, with gold numbering carved into it. The minute and the hour hand were made of ivory and intricately designed. He noticed that the hands were not set behind a glass casing, but could be moved and manipulated at will without the use of a dial. He tilted the clock face and held it up to the light. Clearly illuminated against the pure black back, Kai could see fingerprints at only 4 of the numbers. The 11, 9, 6, and 5 had previously been tampered with. He pored over the clock, desperately trying to think of what the numbers could mean in relation to Umbri. When Arden saw Kai intently observing it, he came up beside him to inspect it as well. "I think this could be a trick? Like a code or something. Only these 4 numbers seem to have been touched, but I can't think of what they could relate to." Arden stared at the face for a long while before muttering, "You've got to be kidding me." He then took the clock from Kai's hands and pointed the hour hand toward the 5, the minute hand toward the 9, then the hour hand toward the 6, and the minute hand toward the 11. A tile in the center of the room gave way as a pedestal slowly rose from under it. Kai stared at Arden in bewilderment. It wasn't numbers. They were letters. V-I-X-V-I-X-I. Vix Vixi means barely alive in the old tongue. No doubt Umbri's way of bitching about his less than extravagant lifestyle. Kai raised an eyebrow in response. If Umbri felt the manor was not extravagant enough for his tastes, he should try sleeping in the woodshed. It was not a natural gem. That was the first thought that crossed Kai's mind when he saw the yellow stone floating mere inches above the pedestal in the center of the study. It had a strange aura to it, one that even a non-magic wielding human such as him could feel. As Kai stepped toward it, Arden's arm shot out to stop him as he shook his head, a warning Kai took to heart. Arden then began to approach the stone as though it were an explosive, set to go off at a moment's notice. Kai saw a sudden flash pulse through the ground. When Arden noticed it, he closed his eyes and began to chant under his breath, words that Kai couldn't quite make out. The whole room began to glow and tremble as though it were alive, a fading heartbeat almost. With one last gasp, the light dissipated, and the room stilled. Arden opened his eyes, reached out, and grabbed the floating stone. He then nodded to Kai and said, "There we go, easy." I think we have different definitions of the word. I suggest we hurry, though. I doubt that Umbri... Kai stilled, suddenly silent. Arden shot him a quizzical look in response. Kid? Kai didn't have time to blink before an unknown force sent him hurtling across the room, pinning him to the south wall of the study. Arden cursed and spun around to see Umbri, standing in the doorway.
"Good evening, Arden,"
Umbri said with a sly smile.
"I see you've made yourself at home."
Kai couldn't move a muscle as an invisible force held him fast to the wall. Arden kept his hands at his side. They twitched slightly, preparing to attack if Umbri so much as flinched. Umbri looked from Arden to Kai, and then to the stone Arden held in his hand.
"I see you've helped yourself to the trinket that you've come for,"
Umbri stated with a noticeable disdain.
"Though I fail to see the cause for this invasion, considering I would have handed the stone to you willingly. As this to be the thanks for my hospitality?"
You seemed less than willing to hand over the stone, and as for your hospitality, as gracious as it was, I think we both know it was nothing more than the means to an end.
"What end?"
Mine, which is no doubt your intent when you hand the stone and me over to Oren. Umbri's left eye twitched for just a moment as he held his calm demeanor.
"Wherever did you hear such a tale?"
Umbri's gaze drifted to Kai, anger burning within his eyes.
"Don't tell me you heard it from this boy. I warn you, Arden, he is a most gifted lawyer."
A trait no doubt he has learned from you, Arden rebutted. Umbri's attention snapped back to Arden.
"You would trust this boy's word over mine?"
I would trust a lowbrow pickpocket's word over yours, Umbri. But yeah, I trust the kid speaks the truth. Umbri sighed and shook his head.
"Well, I suppose the game is up then."
Umbri took a few steps closer to Arden and held out his hand.
"Now, I have someone who'll be arriving very soon expecting that stone. So if you would be so kind as to return it to me."
Or what? You'll fight me for it?
"Good gracious, no!"
Umbri replied with a sinister smile.
"I see no need for things to get drastic. After all, there are other means of persuasion."
Umbri held up his left hand and pulled it into a fist while shouting, "Obstringa!" Kai gasped as an invisible cord wrapped itself around his neck, cutting off almost all his air supply. He tried to free one of his hands to claw at the force that was choking him, but his limbs were still pressed firmly to the wall. Kai's wheezing breaths caused Arden to summon a bolt of lightning within his hand in retaliation. He pointed it straight toward Umbri. Umbri shook his finger toward Arden in a mocking manner.
"An attack on me would not be quick enough to spare his life, Arden. For I assure you, I can kill him in the time it would take you to finish the incantation. And whilst I have no qualms about snapping this pathetic human's neck, something tells me that you might.
Arden's eyes narrowed in contempt. Umbry?
Umbry merely smiled in response, extending his right hand toward Arden.
Give me the stone, Arden.
Arden hesitated, the stone held fast within his hand. Umbry didn't give him time to think. He tightened his fist again. This time, as Kai gasped for air, none came. The world around him was starting to blur, and he could hear his heartbeat pounding in his ears.
All right, you son of a bitch!
Arden shouted as he held out his hand with the stone. Kai couldn't comprehend what Lord Arden was doing. He wanted to shout, "Don't!" but no sound came out, and his vision was getting darker. Umbry grinned and reached out his hand for the stone. Arden muttered something under his breath, and as soon as Umbry's hand made contact with the stone, a brilliant, blinding light emitted from it, filling the room. Umbry stumbled back with the stone in hand, shielding his eyes as Arden shouted, "Ferrum Mattium!" A force like a hammer hit Umbry square in the chest, causing him to stagger and release his hold on Kai. Kai hit the floor hard, coughing and gasping to reclaim the air that had been denied him as the world blurred back into focus. Umbry was quick to recover, shouting, "Flamania!" An intense wind hit Arden and sent the desk and books flying across the room. Kai covered his head with his arms as he too was pushed back across the floor. Arden stood his ground, shouting, "Redacia substana!" The wind could no longer move him as his legs seemed rooted to the floor. The mages continued exchanging spells as Kai crawled out from the clutter of books that were strewn atop and around him. He could see Umbry, eyes wide, desperately trying to advance on Arden. Arden stood his ground, warding off the spells that Umbry flung at him. A soft yellow glow could be seen from the left pocket of Umbry's robe. An idea formed in Kai's mind as off to his right, hidden partly by loose books, he caught sight of a ruby hilt lined in gold.
Vincula Licio!
Umbry shouted as the same invisible ropes that had held Kai tried to entwine themselves around Arden. Arden attempted to raise his hand and shoot a ball of fire at Umbry, but the spell worked faster than expected, locking Arden's arms to his side. Umbry smiled as Arden started chanting, trying to break the invisible binds. Umbry summoned an astral weapon that resembled an axe. It hovered, mimicking the movements of Umbry's hand. The axe was mostly transparent, save for the bit which looked very real and very sharp. As Umbry raised his hand, the astral weapon hovered high above Arden. With a sinister grin, Umbry stared back at Arden as his hand twitched, ready to bring the weapon down on Arden's head in one swift motion. A sudden scream echoed through the study. The axe instantly disappeared as Umbry flailed backward in agony. There, standing behind Umbry, was Kai. He had taken the ruby-hilted letter opener from the floor and driven it into Umbry's back beneath his right shoulder blade. Umbry staggered away and immediately wrenched the blade from his flesh, a stream of green blood now staining his robes. He spun around to meet Kai's face, utter fury glowing in his eyes, unflinching determination glaring back in Kai's.
Glacia hasta usat!
Umbry roared, holding out his left hand. A ball of ice formed within his palm.
Kai!
Arden shouted in warning, but the words barely left his mouth. The ice ball that Umbry held shattered, sending ice shards hurtling at Kai like daggers and propelling him backward. There was a spatter of red as Kai hit the wall behind him and fell silent. The lapse in concentration on Umbry's part was long enough for Arden to free himself from the invisible bonds.
Pyralis Bahara!
Arden's voice shook in anger as a giant flame within his hand hit Umbry square in the chest. Umbry was knocked to the ground. Arden towered toward him.
Timora!
Umbry whispered and disappeared from the room in a flash. Arden gritted his teeth at the coward fleeing. He immediately rushed over to where Kai sat slumped against the wall, muttering a healing spell as he went. His powers were diminished due to Umbry's talismans, but it was possible he could repair some of the damage. "Kid?" Upon closer inspection, Arden could see how badly Kai was injured. Deep gashes covered his right side and his right shoulder, along with a long cut on his head. Multiple other cuts of varying depths marked his arms and legs, and his clothes were soaked with blood from his wounds. "Can you hear me?" Arden asked again, hoping for a response. "Kid, say something if you can hear me."
Ouch,
Kai mumbled, barely above a whisper. Arden breathed a slight sigh of relief. Yeah, no shit. That's what you get for picking a fight with a mage. What the hell were you thinking stabbing Umbri like that? You know that a tiny little dagger isn't enough to do him in.
Distraction,
Kai whispered back. Speaking was difficult for him, and his breathing was labored. With great effort, Kai pushed his left hand forward toward Arden. Upon opening his closed fist, Arden was astonished to see a familiar yellow glow. Kai held the stone Umbri had taken from him. Arden realized that Kai's attack on Umbri had not only saved him from the astral weapon, it had also distracted Umbri so that Kai could lift the stone from his pocket without him noticing. Kai opened his eyes and lifted his head so his gaze met Arden's.
Said it was important. People die if he had it, right?
Arden nodded. That's right. Kai lifted a shaky hand and gave the stone to Arden.
Then you can't let him have it.
I won't, kid. Just try not to talk, okay? Umbri appeared on the ground at Tora and Belthier's feet outside the manor. He was gasping in extraordinary pain and trying to focus on healing the knife wound in his back. Tora regarded him with skepticism.
I see that Arden wasn't quite the easy task you made him out to be,
he commented. Umbri snarled at him in response.
Arden is of no consequence. I have reclaimed the most important piece. He won't be able to escape the barrier, and it will be easy to hunt him down. As long as we...
Umbri reached into the pocket of his robe to show the stone to his other two comrades. As soon as his hand brushed the fabric, though, Umbri's face turned white. He looked noticeably ill.
What is it?
That worthless, traitorous, fucking human!
Umbri's voice was shaking with rage. His fury bypassed all pain he felt from his wound as he shot to his feet and summoned two magic weapons into his hands, a crossbow and a battle axe. He handed the bow to Tora and the axe to Belthier.
We are going back inside to reclaim the stone and Arden's head.
It wasn't a question, and Tora and Belthier seemed to pick up on that.
Arden may not be at full strength, but he has enough power to prove troublesome. We should confront him together.
He will no doubt try to leave the manor in order to escape the confines of the barrier. He cannot escape!
Instantly, he summoned a fire that surrounded him and the outside of the manor in an impassable blaze. The fire quickly licked up the manor walls as though the whole building was coated in oil.
If I have to burn this manor to ashes, I will pull Arden's corpse from within it,
Umbri swore as he watched the flames grow higher.
As for the boy, he best pray death finds him before I do.
A loud ruckus could be heard outside, and Arden could now see flames rushing up the exterior walls just outside the window. Umbri was either trying to force them out or burn them alive, and if they took too long to decide on which they preferred, he would most assuredly come in and get them. Kai looked toward the billowing smoke cloud enveloping the window.
They are blocking escape. They will come in.
Don't worry about it. I'll handle them when they do, Arden said as he went back to chanting the healing spell. Kai took a deep breath, drawing the last of his energy.
Past the kitchen, in the cellar, there's a griffin statue.
What did I tell you about talking?
Statue leads to a spillway under the manor. Umbri doesn't know. You can get out that way.
First step is patching you up. Kai looked back to the windows, noticing the flames growing higher.
He felt a rush of frustration and fear coming to terms with his situation. No matter how much he wanted to leave, he could barely move. And Lord Arden staying here any longer was just ensuring he didn't get out either. As such, Kai slowly shook his head.
"There is no time,"
Kai stated as sternly as he could.
"They will kill you. You have to go now."
Kai's breath shuddered and his focus blurred. His eyes rolled back into his head as he fell silent once again. Arden checked to make sure he was still breathing. He had a pulse, but not a strong one. Arden stood up and looked around, taking stock of his surroundings. Kai was right. It was only a matter of time before they stormed inside the manor, and once they were inside, Arden wasn't sure he could hold all three of them off, thanks to the barrier. And definitely not if he was trying to keep Kai alive. The healing spell had cost Arden a great deal of energy, and it had only slowed the bleeding, not stopped it. Kai was fading fast. He wouldn't last long without help, and the only way to achieve that was getting the hell out of Umbre's manor. Deciding on a course of action, Arden bent down and lifted Kai into his arms. "Statue in the cellar, huh, kid? All right, we are getting out of here then." Arden was moving as quickly as possible through the flames that were enveloping the manor. Smoke was now filling the interior and his lungs as he ran through the thick, eye-watering smog. The fire was growing, licking toward the roof, breaking windows with blasts of heat as Arden ran past them. He headed down the hall, descending the staircase down the 3 flights toward the kitchen. As soon as he passed the main entrance, the front doors blasted inwards. Amongst the splintered wood stood Umbre, Tora, and Balthier, shoulder to shoulder, armed and obviously angry. Umbre locked eyes with Arden for just a moment before shooting a fireball at him and Kai. Arden bolted past it, singeing the hem of his robes in the process. He propelled into the kitchen, slamming the door behind him. "Motia and Paria!" Arden said with a wave of his hand at the buffet cabinet. The large structure glided across the floor and planted itself in front of the door. A moment later, a loud bang hit the door and began to break it. Arden did not stick around to watch his pursuers bust through. He swiftly opened the door to the cellar and raced down the stairs. As soon as his feet hit earth, Arden shouted, "Liquia!" as the staircase he had just descended melted into a puddle on the ground. Arden locked eyes with the griffin statue in the corner of the room just as the cellar door shot open. "Liberia!" he shouted at the statue. The statue began to contort as if it were alive and stepped aside, bowing to Arden and allowing him access to the tunnel behind it. "Saparia Matira!" Arden directed to the statue as soon as he entered the tunnel. The griffin placed its stone body directly in front of the tunnel entrance and once again became inanimate. Arden's elven eyes allowed him to see perfectly in the darkness. All he could hope was that the lack of light would slow Umbre down. He barreled down the narrow stone walkway as a swift river of water rushed by at his feet. The path ahead broke off to the right and left. Arden took a hard right as he heard voices enter the tunnel behind him. The only option at the moment was to flee. But if he could follow the tunnels beyond the confines of the barrier, he could make a stand and summon a portal to get the hell out of here. Another dead end, with the path splitting off to the left. Arden noticed the river rushing by him had started to retreat, leaving nothing but the dry stone underbed. Shit. The sudden disappearance of the water told Arden he better quicken his pace. Racing on ahead, the tunnel twisted to another right, then a left. The further in he went, the more Arden felt the effects of the barrier lessen. Another left turn, and the amulet around Arden's neck began to glow, telling him the barrier was weak enough that he could call out. Arden focused his thoughts and reached out. "Valor! Valor!" "Arden?" a voice responded in his head. "Do you know the time?" "I need a portal, and have Marines standing by." "A portal? At this hour? What the blazes are you—" "I haven't time for 20 fucking questions, Valor. Just summon the damn portal, now!" Arden's concentration was broken by the intense sound of rumbling as the ground beneath him trembled ferociously. He didn't have to guess the source of the vibrations. He bolted forward as fast as his feet could carry him. Arden followed the twists and turns of the tunnel, indiscriminately taking a left or a right at every fork. The rumbling was approaching, and from the sound of things, it was catching up.
He looked over his shoulder for just an instant to see a wall of water charging towards him, chasing after every twist or turn he made, as though it possessed autonomy. Arden pulled a hard right at the next divide and then stopped in his tracks, as he was met by a dead end. He quickly turned back to try to correct his mistake, but the water was already upon him.
Ventia Morio!
Arden shouted as he grasped the stone within his pocket and held it toward the oncoming wave. The wall of wind hit the water, halting its procession. Arden was supporting an unconscious Kai with his left arm and holding back a tidal wave with his right. The wind was blasting against the water, but Arden could tell he was losing the fight, being pushed closer to the wall behind him as the water inched forward. It was taking every last ounce of energy he possessed to keep the water at bay. Beyond the wall of water, Arden could make out the form of 3 figures approaching him. Arden's arm was shaking, and his strength was all but spent. Tora took aim with his bow, and Umri continued to advance towards Arden. Belthier held his place at the rear, blocking a sudden exit with his stance and a very sharp axe. Whether death came by water, arrow, or axe, there was nowhere left for Arden to run. Tora shot the first bolt. Arden was able to divert a gust of wind to reflect it, but his momentary lapse in concentration cost him as a surge of water slammed him back against the wall. Arden quickly redirected the wind back toward the water, but he was now pressed firmly against the wall behind him. Umbri smiled as Tora knotted another bolt. Umbri continued advancing as Tora once again took aim. Arden was bracing for the inevitable impact when out of the corner of his eye, a familiar and welcome swirling blue light appeared. Arden was certain he had never been so happy to see such a sight in his entire life. From that moment, time seemed to slow. Tora's last shot whizzed harmlessly past Arden's shoulder, disappearing into a vortex of blue. Umbri could be heard shouting, "No!" as Arden stepped back into the portal behind him and disappeared with the stone and Kai.